as that in the book. Elizabeth, aged 20. This also I annexed, thinking that it might come in useful as a piece of evidence. "Looks as if the owners of this place left it in a hurry, Quatermain," said Stephen. "That's it, my boy. Or perhaps they didn't leave, perhaps they stopped here." "Murdered?" I nodded and said, "I dare say friend Hassan could tell us something about the matter. Meanwhile, as supper isn't ready yet, let us have a look at that church while it is light." We walked through the palm and orange grove to where the building stood finely placed upon a mound. It was well constructed of a kind of coral rock, and a glance showed us that it had been gutted by fire. The discoloured walls told their own tale. The interior was now full of shrubs and creepers, and an ugly yellowish snake glided from what had been the stone altar. Without, the graveyard was enclosed by a broken wall, only we could see no trace of graves. Near the gateway, however, was a rough mound. "If we could dig into that," I said, "I expect we should find the bones of the people who inhabited this place. Does that suggest anything to you, Stephen?" "Nothing, except that they were probably killed." "You should learn to draw inferences. It is a useful art, especially in Africa. It suggests to me that, if you are right, the deed was not done by natives, who would never take the trouble to bury the dead. Arabs, on the contrary, might do so, especially if there were any bastard Portuguese among them who called themselves Christians. But whatever happened must have been a long while ago," and I pointed to a self-sown hardwood tree growing from the mound, which could scarcely have been less than 20 years old. We returned to the house to find that our meal was ready. Hassan had asked us to dine with him, but for obvious reasons I preferred that Sammy should cook our food and that he should dine with us. He appeared full of compliments, though I could see hate and suspicion in his eye, and we fell to on the kid that we had bought from him, for I did not wish to accept any gifts from this fellow. Our drink was square-face gin, mixed with water that I sent Hans to fetch with his own hands from the stream that ran by the house, lest otherwise it should be drugged. At first Hassan, like a good Mohammedan, refused to touch any spirits, but as the meal went on he politely relented upon this point, and I poured him out a liberal tot. The appetite comes in eating, as the Frenchman said, and the same thing applies to drinking. So at least it was in Hassan's case, who probably thought that the quantity swallowed made no difference to his sin. After the third dose of square face he grew quite amiable and talkative. Thinking the opportunity a good one, I sent for Sammy and through him told our host that we were anxious to hire 20 porters to carry our packages. He declared there was not such a thing as a porter within 100 miles, whereon I gave him some more gin. The end of it was that we struck a bargain, I forget for how much, he promising to find us 20 good men who were to stay with us for as long as we wanted them. Then I asked him about the destruction of the mission station, but though he was half drunk, on this point he remained very close. All he would say was that he had heard that 20 years ago the people called the Mazitu, who were very fierce, had raided right down to the coast and killed those who dwelt there, except a white man and his wife who had fled inland and never been seen again. "How many of them were buried in that mound by the church?" I asked quickly. "Who told you they were buried there?" he replied with a start, but seeing his mistake went on. "I do not know what you mean. I never heard of anyone being buried. Sleep well, honoured lords. I must go and see to the loading of my goods upon the Maria." Then rising he salaamed and walked, or rather rolled, away. "So the Maria hasn't sailed after all," I said, and whistled in a certain fashion. Instantly Hans crept into the room out of the darkness, for this was my signal to him. "Hans," I said, "I hear sounds upon that island. Slip down to the shore and spy out what is happening. No one will see you if you are careful." "No, Baas," he answered with a grin. "I do not think that anyone will see Hans if he is careful, especially at night," and he slid away as quietly as he had come. Now I went out and spoke to Mavovo, telling him to keep a good watch and to be sure that every man had his gun ready, as I thought that these people were slave traders and might attack us in the night. In that event, I said, we were to fall back upon the steppe, but not to fire until I gave the word. "Good, my father," he answered. "This is a lucky journey. I never thought that there would be hope of war so soon. My snake forgot to mention it the other night. Sleep safe, Macumazahn. Nothing that woke shall reach you while we live." "Don't be so sure," I answered, and we lay down in the bedroom with our clothes on and our rifles by our side. The next thing I remember was someone shaking me by the shoulder. I thought it was Stephen, who had agreed to keep awake for the first part of the night and to call me at 1 in the morning. Indeed, he was awake, for I could see the glow from the pipe he smoked. "Baas," whispered the voice of Hans, "I have found out everything. They are loading the Maria with slaves, taking them in big boats from the island." "So," I answered, "but how did you get here? Are the hunters asleep without?" He chuckled. "No, they are not asleep. They look with all their eyes and listen with all their ears. Yet old Hans passed through them. Even the Baas Somers did not hear him." "That I didn't," said Stephen. "Thought a rat was moving, no more." I stepped through the place where the door had been on the step. By the light of the fire which the hunters had lit without, I could see Mavovo sitting wide awake, his gun upon his knees, and beyond him 2 sentries. I called him and pointed to Hans. "See," I said, "what good watchmen you are when one can step over your heads and enter my room without your knowing it." Mavovo looked at the Hottentot and felt his clothes and boots to see whether they were wet with the night dew. "Ow!" he exclaimed in a surly voice. "I say that nothing which walks could reach you, Macumazahn, but this yellow snake has crawled between us on his belly. Look at the new mud that stains his waistcoat." "Yet snakes can bite and kill," answered Hans with a snigger. "Oh, you Zulus think that you are very brave and shout and flourish spears and battle axes. One poor Hottentot dog is worth a whole impi of you after all. No, don't try to strike me, Mavovo the warrior, since we both serve the same master in our separate ways. When it comes to fighting I will leave the matter to you, and when it is a case of watching or spying, do you leave it to Hans. Look here, Mavovo," and he opened his hand in which was a horn snuff box such as Zulus sometimes carry in their ears. "To whom does this belong?" "It is mine," said Mavovo, "and you have stolen it." "Yes," jeered Hans, "it is yours. Also I stole it from your ear as I passed you in the dark. Don't you remember that you thought that a gnat had tickled you and hit up at your face?" "It is true," growled Mavovo, "and you, snake of a Hottentot, are great in your own low way. Yet next time anything tickles me I shall strike not with my hand but with a spear." Then I turned them both out, remarking to Stephen that this was a good example of the eternal fight between courage and cunning. After this, as I was sure that Hassan and his friends were too busy to interfere with us that night, we went to bed and slept the sleep of the just. When I got up the next morning I found that Stephen Somers had already risen and gone out, nor did he appear until I was half through my breakfast. "Where on earth have you been?" I asked, noting that his clothes were torn and covered with wet moss. "Up the tallest of those palm trees, Quatermain. Saw an Arab climbing one of them with a rope, and got another Arab to teach me the trick. It isn't really difficult, though it looks alarming." "What in the name of goodness—" I began. "Oh!" he interrupted, "my ruling passion. Looking through the glasses I thought I caught sight of an orchid growing near the crown, so went up. It wasn't an orchid after all, only a mass of yellow pollen. But I learned something for my pains. Sitting in the top of that palm I saw the Maria working out from under the lee of the island. Also, far away, I noted a streak of smoke, and watching it through the glasses, made out what looked to me uncommonly like a man of war steaming slowly along the coast. In fact, I am sure it was, and English too. Then the mist came up and I lost sight of them." "My word!" I said, "that will be the crocodile. What I told our host Hassan was not altogether bunkum. Mr. Cato, the port officer at Durban, mentioned to me that the crocodile was expected to call there within the next fortnight to take in stores after a slave hunting cruise down the coast. Now it would be odd if she chanced to meet the Maria and asked to have a look at her cargo, wouldn't it?" "Not at all, Quatermain, for unless one or the other of them changes her course, that is just what she must do within the next hour or so, and I jolly well hope she will. I haven't forgiven that beast Delgado the trick he tried to play on us by slipping away with our goods, to say nothing of those poor devils of slaves. Pass the coffee, will you?" For the next 10 minutes we ate in silence, for Stephen had an excellent appetite and was hungry after his morning climb. Just as we finished our meal Hassan appeared looking even more villainous than he had done the previous day. I saw also that he was in a truculent mood, induced perhaps by the headache from which he was evidently suffering as a result of his potations, or perhaps the fact that the Maria had got safe away with the slaves, as he imagined, unobserved by us, was the cause of the change in his demeanour. A third alternative may have been that he intended to murder us during the previous night.